FarCon is Farcaster's annual event organized by the community for innovators, builders, and network contributors. Thank you to all the sponsors who made this conversation possible, including media partner GM Farcaster, media sponsor Noun Stow, and the FarCon team of volunteers. Enjoy this behind-the-scenes interview, followed by the FarCon keynote. GM Farcaster, we're coming to you from FarCon. We're getting ready to start. We've got a few minutes before we go live on stage, and Dan and Varun are going to kick off FarCon. So we want to start with you two. So first of all, Dan, what were you doing at 1:28 in the morning?
My hotel has a club underneath it, and so I went to investigate.
Yeah. So in other words, you launched a new meme.
Yeah.
New meme alert. So if you haven't looked at the timeline, make sure you do. Amazing. So what are you looking forward to today? What's like your thing that you're most looking forward to?
I mean, URL to IRL, right? So seeing everyone in person is always really fun.
Awesome. And Varun, what were you doing at 1:28 in the morning?
I was peacefully asleep in bed. We both walked by the club at 11:45, and there were three gentlemen outside who was like, "Would you like to come in?" And I said no, and Dan said no, but you could see in his eyes that it was a yes. And so I went up and went to bed, and then Dan was like, "I'm going to go back down," and he did.
My other question for you, so did you get to see any of the projects that came out of the hackathon yet?
I have not yet. I'm excited to see them.
Okay. All right.
You're standing
Adrian.
next to a future winner, just saying.
Yeah, future winner. So yeah, what were you doing at 1:28 in the morning, finishing up your hack?
I was laughing at Dan's feed.
Yeah,
Actually,
and you were
at
hacking.
1:28. No, we were done by 12:30. We hacked straight from noon, when like the talks finished, like till 9 o'clock. They tried kicking us out early, and we were like, no, we are staying till 9.
Do we get a preview of what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Coin your content. Okay. Share to Farcaster without leaving Farcaster.
So
nice.
Interesting, yeah. So she's trying to streamline the coining.
Coin or coin
you know
or
she's a big.
Can we
She
coin
loves
Dan's
her meme
last night
coins.
cast?
Yeah, we can coin it.
We're gonna coin it. So what in terms of like where we're going and what we're gonna expect to hear you say today in the keynote? Like, what are your sort of highlights? I'll start with Dan, and then Varun will add you in.
I'm gonna coin you
Well,
guys.
I think we got feedback last year that people really enjoyed the Q&A. So we're actually optimizing for Q&A this year a bit more than just kind of giving a long speech. But I think reflect a little bit of just like what's changed year over year. We went from frames to mini apps. We now have wallet, right? Rewards. So kind of big things that have changed on the network. And I think that the big, like, kind of new idea for us is we are very focused still on growing daily active users, but now daily active users with funded wallets. And we just think that's differentiating for Farcaster, and it's good for developers, it's good for creators. Like, ultimately, if money is moving around Farcaster, I think that is a good thing for the network, and you need to have funded wallets for that. So I think that's going to be the big focus, and we have a bunch of different things we're working on to kind of support that.
Amazing. And Varun, what in terms of from looking more from the tech side and Snapchain and everything that's been happening with that, looking forward for like the next year, where do you see us a year from now, the next FarCon?
I think the big thing that we want to do, which is like pretty tech heavy, but has a big user impact, is getting people to sign up for free. Like, how can we actually get a X-like or Instagram-like sign-up process where people can come in and get in for free, but do it in a way such the network itself doesn't get overloaded. We'll talk a little bit about this, but like TLDR, it's a bunch of Snapchain changes that let apps onboard users, which we're very excited about.
Awesome. So yesterday at the On-Chain Creator House, I got to download the beta version of Coinbase Wallet. So this is going to happen. We're going to be sharing this next week, so this will all be out there already. What are you excited about, nervous about, concerned about with this new client, essentially?
I think generally excited. Like, it's awesome to see another high quality, really well built client come into the ecosystem, and I've seen the previews and it looks great.
Have you tried it yet? Have you GM'd from Coinbase Wallet yet?
Yesterday.
Yeah?
I got
great.
onboarded yesterday, and I casted my first cast.
Oh, fantastic! I didn't even see. I'll have to check that. And how about from your perspective, like what's exciting, what's concerning?
I think just that Coinbase has millions of users using Coinbase Wallet, so bringing those users into Farcaster, that's exciting. It's going to grow the network, right? But also new people are going to kind of, I'm sure, have some transitioning to that, both people who are on the network and new people. So, the good and the bad.
The good and the bad. Yeah, always a little adjustments. Okay, we've got only a few minutes to go, so we're going to wrap here. Looking forward to hearing you at the keynote. Adrian, any other last words before you should see what's happening in front of us right now. Jesse, we're talking about you. We've been talking about Coinbase Wallet if you want to jump in. So we'll let you guys go and get situated and get ready to hit the stage. What, any last minute? No. Okay. All right, everybody. Have fun. Happy FarCon.
Yeah.
FarCon NYC's keynote was recorded on May 2nd, 2025 with Farcaster co-founders Dan Romero and Varun Srinivasan. FarCon is Farcaster's annual event organized by the community for innovators, builders, and network contributors. Thank you to all the sponsors who made this conversation possible, including media partner GM Farcaster, media sponsor NounsDAO, and the FarCon team of volunteers. Learn more at farcon.nyc.
So first of all, I wanted to thank everyone who kind of organized FarCon, but let's give a round of applause for Emma. I mean, she's like, yeah, in many ways, it's a very thankless job to have an entire social network just like kind of descend on you and like all these different things. So she's held it like total grace and an amazing venue today. We want to start with 2 questions. So do you want to do the first one?
Yeah, this is going to be a repeat of a question we did last time, but how many of y'all made a new friend through Farcaster? Can we get a quick show of hands? It's a lot of hands for 37 people.
Yeah. Second question, raise your hand if you've made money on Farcaster. Okay, so yeah, it's the theme of today. Wanted to just go through a couple of quick slides. Last year the slides didn't quite work for us, but I think this year it seems like it's going to work. We've come a long way in the last year. So last year we were talking about frames. This year we have mini apps. I think we also now have the wallet, which is pretty cool. I think most of you probably raise of hands if you have a funded Warpcast wallet. Okay, yeah. Warplet. Yeah, so made a lot of progress on that, and raise your hand if you've received a weekly reward at one point or another. Okay, so people are actually using the network. It's good. So I think the big thing that we want to focus on kind of this year and going forward is continuing to grow the number of daily active users, but with funded wallets. And the reason this is important is it's taken us a while over the last couple of years to get to this point, but we really want to be focused on what makes Farcaster different. And the reality is crypto actually is the thing that makes Farcaster different than other social networks. And having kind of an economy built into the social network where you can kind of do anything, right? You can launch a cryptocurrency and have it tip as a bot, right? And like build this massive new community like DGen, or you can do something like Clanker, or you can build a mini app or tip, or any of these kind of economic things that you can do only with crypto. It's only possible in Farcaster. And so the only way that works, though, is if you actually have money in a wallet. So I think we're going to be very focused over the next year on driving the total number of users with funded wallets and being pretty vocal about that, because I think that is going to be the thing that will attract people who want to build kind of new, interesting experiences, because it's the only place they can actually go do that. And so how we're planning on doing that is four things. So the first thing, and Varun talked a little bit about this at the NANAR Builder Night, but we're going to make signups free. And so technically at the protocol, it actually won't be free. It'll be close to free. But we're going to be doing a bunch of stuff to make it so that any app, if they want to bring their user base to Farcaster, they can, and then that will be a way of helping grow the network. And that brings us into the second point, where Coinbase Wallet, Base, a bunch of people here from the team, they're going to be bringing their millions of users to Farcaster. So this is the first time we're having an app with an existing user base integrate into the protocol. So that's really exciting. Zapper is also building Farcaster functionality into their wallet, and I think the rest of this year we're going to be spending a lot of time trying to convince other apps with existing user bases to integrate into the protocol. Last two things, which are related, rewards, which we kind of talked about. It seems like a lot of you have received some.
we're planning to dial up the size of the rewards, right? So right now we're doing about $25,000 a week in USDC for casting. We've done some experiments on the developer side and then for invites, but I think we're going to meaningfully increase the amount of money that we are actually putting out into the network and money that our app is generating across whatever we're doing, right? So swap revenue. I think we aspirationally want to put as much of that back into the ecosystem to create the flywheel around rewards. And I think earning your first dollar on chain on Farcaster may actually be our equivalent of find your 10 friends on Facebook. And so I think rewards is a really powerful way for people to onboard into crypto and not actually have to use a crypto on-ramp. And then the last thing is creator onboarding. Ted, who ran FarCon last year, now is on the team. And yeah. And she's actually leading the kind of like creator onboarding experiments that we've been running. You may have noticed we had a bunch of journalists join in March. And that is like the first of many experiments we're going to be running around targeting specific communities and interests to see if we can get them to come on to Farcaster and create some level of density. And I think one interesting thing here is like Murtaza, who kind of helped inspire the journalist onboarding for us. He came into the network last year, referred by a friend, and he actually made enough money on the network through tips, rewards, degen, that he funded independent journalism trip to Syria. So when the regime fell there, he went to Syria on his own strictly because of Farcaster. And so, and I think Jan Frula is another good example of someone who was on Farcaster, made some money, and was able to move to the United States, move to LA, and pursue a career in art as a result of being on Farcaster. And so I think leaning into this idea that Farcaster provides economic opportunity for those who kind of want to find it across a variety of different ways is very much something that I think we're going to try to lean into with creators. Because on Web2 Social, for the most part, unless you're kind of like one of the big guys, you really don't monetize well, and it's hard to support kind of your livelihood. So that's kind of what we're focused on. But we really wanted to spend most of this time for Q&A. We got good feedback on that last year, and we did a bunch of Q&A yesterday for Builder Day. So with that, if people have questions, it's a little hard to see, so just raise hands and we'll kind of call. Oh.
Okay, if this works. What's up, everybody? We're going to do our Q&A now. I'll be on this side. Emma's going to be on that side. If you have questions, just raise your hand. We'll try to be fair. This is probably your only chance to ask questions of Dan and Varun. We know they do not reply on Farcaster. Rish.
So you have talked a lot about the rename from Warpcast to Farcaster. What you haven't talked about is, are you going to rename the Warplet to Farplet?
Yes.
All right, next question then.
Hi. You guys, for mini apps, is there any planned ideas around the thumbnails being more dynamic or interesting to showcase what's in the mini apps? People click thumbnails, not apps, similar to YouTube.
Yeah, I think there's been a couple of things people have been talking about. One is getting better previews of apps in the mini app store, especially when apps are featured, being able to see and swipe a little bit more. I think that's something that's on our roadmap to do. The other thing we want to think about, we don't have like a great idea for this, but how the previews that show up in the feed are actually, I think, the predominant way that people tend to discover apps. And I think one of the pain points we've heard from devs is generating those is like pretty hard. And so we want to think about like a template or some way to make it very, very easy to generate dynamic and useful images for people. So 2 things on the roadmap.
I think one thing to think about there is there's a trade-off between privacy and customization. So the idea that it would be cool if you were browsing the feed and the dev could like dynamically serve you up an image, but that also means that you're kind of leaking your like viewing data directly to the dev. So I think there's probably some balance that we can think about there, but I agree, like in the sense that like obviously YouTube is famous for like making the preview is actually the thing, whatever that face is for YouTube, like people click through it.
Great. Anyone on Emma's side?
Testing.
Hi, Brian here. Sign up to Unlonely. Anyway, mini apps was great. What are like your future plans for 2025 for mini apps, like new features, something like a sneak peek you can give us? Not something that you're talking about on dev calls, but something you're thinking about in a grand scheme of things with mini apps.
I think a lot of what we want to fix up with mini apps are more obvious things that developers have asked for. So I think Karthik, a couple nights ago, shipped a bunch of new APIs for swapping, sending, viewing tokens, which I think are like pretty cool. And I think a lot of what we want to do is make it easier to use funds in mini apps, make it easier to transact. So I think that'll be like a big focus for us. Everything from making transaction previews easier to making bridging money across wallets easier. And just being able to use funds in mini apps.
Yeah, I think there's generally always this idea of like, is there some one big new thing that you can launch that really makes it better and like really goes viral? And I think the reality is that just paying attention to the feedback developers are giving us around like, it's too hard to like develop this locally. It's like, okay, figure out how to do a local debugger kind of thing, or whatever these like small things. But if you can kind of accumulate that, you let the developer actually be the creative person and not like get in the way. And so I think like really just kind of driving to just like make it as easy as possible for people to build mini apps. And especially with like, I think vibe coding, like you can actually increase the total number of people who can build a mini app. And so I think just like continuing to make it as simple as possible and offer this kind of like rich functionality, like that I think is going to be our priority for a while.
Cool. I think we'd one in the middle here.
Yeah, when will there be a search for the mini apps? Because to discover, I've got to go through the long list. And then secondly, would you like an origami top hat?
We can talk later about the top hat. Yeah, we can do the top hat later. I think, so search is live on mobile. I mean, it's relatively rudimentary, but I think we'll have an improved search on web soon. I think it's like in the next couple of weeks. And then, I'm sure we can iterate on mobile and make it better. I think one thing is interesting, a lot of people always want to be like, how can we make search better? Like, I want to search for this or that. And I think the reality is most people actually don't search. Like, people in this room, you're probably not the average user. And I think you have to just think through, it's like the average person coming onto Farcaster, they don't really leave the home feed. Like, the only time they leave the home feed is if they have a notification or a direct message. Like, that's it. Like, and so, like, actually approaching it for the way to discover these things, for the most part, is going to be you see it in a cast. And so making the algo really good and kind of like making the home feed the place that most people, at least is the primary place of discovery, is probably where we should spend more time versus making the world's best search. But we should do both.
Yeah, right side. Hey guys, I'm Buga. First time in New York and first time in FarCon. Fall in love already with the vibe. What's your favorite mini app, and which mini app you would like to see which is not there yet? Yeah, so I'd like to say that, like children, I don't have a favorite mini app. I do think Tiago's Wyatt, Where You At, that is my favorite right now, in the sense that I think it's something that I've really wanted for a long time. I was like a very big Foursquare user back in the day, and so the fact that someone actually finally built that on top of the And there have been a couple of iterations, but the fact that it's like really nicely integrated as a mini app, and that like I can just check in when I get to a place, it's pretty great.
Yeah, I think acid test is pretty cool, especially with the new web mini apps, being able to load it up on the side and listen as you're scrolling around the feed.
Yeah, I mean mini apps, like there's a list. Linda has posted it. There's like 70 different ideas, and like just go to someone build the channel, and like just there's a zillion ideas of what people could go do. I think like a Neopets idea like would do pretty well, and I think it would do well beyond just Farcaster.
Yeah, I think the coolest thing is like I did a bunch of mini app reviews a week ago, and I think the quality of mini apps is like improving dramatically in terms of there are things that are really fun to play. Like my litmus test is, does my wife use mini apps? And in the last few weeks, she's been addicted to a bunch of them, like Say Cheese, which is the one where you have to get the bot to say the word cheese, and there's different levels. So there's a lot of cool mechanics, I think, emerging with mini apps.
Yeah, there's an opportunity for paperclip maximizer or optimizer.
Oh, universal paperclip?
Yeah. So someone should build universal paperclip as a mini app. If you don't know that game, it's pretty good.
Cool. The correct answer to that question was Ponder, by the way. That's it.
So I'm just curious, you mentioned that for creator onboarding and for building in apps from other places, you want to bring in community bases, like the users from other areas. How do you envision channels enabling community building in a more effective way than they currently have been?
Yeah, so I think channels has been a tricky product. We've probably spent more time on channels than anything else in the history of like the app. And I don't think we've ever cracked it, right? I think there's just a lot of complexity with channels, and they just haven't hit the kind of product market fit in terms of driving growth and kind of being a primary reason people join Farcaster. It's an extremely good feature for driving like depth of engagement and people who like really invest in their channels. That's like actually really valuable to the network, but we haven't kind of bridged the gap with new users. I know that OpenRank has their kind of Cura product that's like focused on channels, and so I'm optimistic that that can kind of like unlock something there. But I think we probably need to kind of get to a place in the next few months of like, okay, what is the future of channels, and like making sure that that's really clear for people. But I think where we are probably going to be more focused is, like I said, those priorities up there of like make signups free, do this kind of like hand-to-hand combat style onboarding of creators, and then be really focused around mini apps in the wallet, because I think that is actually the uniquely differentiated feature of Farcaster. But that said, who knows? I mean, last year we were talking about channels, and this year we're talking about funded wallets, so things can change pretty dynamically.
Thanks, guys. Could you talk a little bit more about the recent Monad announcement, and maybe more specifically, are you looking at it as a potential alternative architecture for snap chains? So really this is a bit an effort to get more different applications and type of a user that I think you open up with Dan.
Do you want to answer on Snapchain?
So the question was about Monad and Snapchain. I think Snapchain, the way we think about Snapchain's architecture is it's really a data storage layer and not a blockchain. And Snapchain will always sit sort of on top of a blockchain and make it really, really easy to replicate. So for the foreseeable future, we think Snapchain will exist as is. The contracts that it's based on are on OP mainnet. They could be on any blockchain. I don't think there's any intrinsic limitation or need for them to be on OP mainnet, but it'll likely be where it is. But maybe Dan, you want to add a little bit about Monad?
Yeah, I think, so one thing that we want to do is Farcaster should kind of sit agnostic across all of crypto, right? Like the goal is to actually have it be the crypto native social network. So whatever blockchain you're building something on, Farcaster should work. And I think with embedded wallets now, like we have the ability to kind of make that happen. And I think it's like worth pointing out is like, a lot of people are like, oh, Farcaster is on Base, or like Farcaster is in the Base ecosystem. I actually think it's the opposite. It's Farcaster existed and Base hustled and did a lot of work to get a lot of developers building on Base. And like the reason people are building on Base is because it's a good product, not because there's some like exclusive lock-in with Farcaster. And so my sense is like, there are going to be other chains. Monad is like one of them where they're going and trying to find a group of people to build on that chain. And like we should support that, because if someone builds an interesting app, if you're on Farcaster, you should be able to use it. And so I think that is like an important thing of like crypto, I've been in crypto a long time, is like very tribal around chains. It's almost like a religion. And I think that's not a good way to kind of think about it. Is like it's actually a net positive anytime there's a good crypto app in crypto, because it's just increasing the number of people in crypto. It's normalizing crypto as actually being useful, rather than this kind of thing that's a technology that has a promise but has never been realized.
Hello, good morning. Yesterday at the Builder Day, you presented this kind of new punchline, a network on which you can make money, like a social network on which you make money, which makes sense, and I like it, and seeing YouTube, it's perfect. But I'm worried about like a vibe shift, because it's a little like a club on which you go to get laid. Like clubs are for getting laid. But if a club presents itself like a place to get laid, I wouldn't go. And Farcaster is a pretty cozy place, and I love being here with all of you, but I'm not sure if in 5 years' time, if that punchline is successful, I would want to be here or in the community of that place.
Yeah, so, I think the way to think about it is like, we want to kind of be an index on everything that's happening in crypto. So if people are doing stuff in crypto that's hyper-financialized or things that people find distasteful, okay, that's going to exist, just like stuff exists on the web or in the App Store. But I think the positive side of that, and one of the reasons, for example, we use stablecoins is like it's actually very approachable for the average new user, right? So when you're getting your first dollars on chain and then not having it be kind of fluctuating and it just feels like real money in a bank account, that's pretty cool, right? Like the tip feature that we recently released is that's there's no hyper-financialization of it. You're literally sending $1 to people as like an appreciation. But so I think that kind of stuff is how we'll balance it. And I think ultimately, you know, if we do our job well, if you don't want to see certain types of content or you know, stuff on chain, the algo or who you follow can actually give you a lot more control over that. And so I think we've been around for a while now, and I think people really know us. It's like we're not you know, degens. We're not in the trenches. I don't like ultimately we're trying to build something that can be for everyone. And I think, but everyone also means, you know, people doing stuff that you might not want. Anything?
No, I think the other thing is, like, you know, when Dan and I first started this, we weren't focused on like explicit financialization. Like, we're really about like, let's build a social network on top of crypto. But I think 4 years in, some of the most fun, most interesting things we've seen people do are all gravitating around leveraging the financialization of crypto in some interesting way. And like when you see a lot of smart people like moving in that direction and building cool stuff, that's not just gambling, but like interesting from an entertainment perspective, interesting from a help other people perspective. That seems to be where a lot of the energy of the network is coming from, and we want to lean into that.
Yeah, I mean, and a good example of this is, you know, Nicholas and Seed Club, they built this crowdfund mini app in a pretty short period of time. And then I think someone's dog, like they raised money to like do a life-saving surgery. Like that's like, I think a feel-good story. Like it's not like, you know, some terrible thing. And so I think the permissionlessness, the programmability, and the fact that everyone has a wallet, you know, with money in it in the long term is, I think, just going to unlock a lot of really good things in addition to, you know, some things that are maybe more distasteful.
Hey, what's up? Zach. You talked a lot about kind of creator rewards and developer rewards. Do you ever see a situation where there'll be sort of like a micropayment or a financial incentive for reporting a cast successfully to help kind of clean up some of the lower quality folks that are on Farcaster with spammier responses?
Yeah, it's a good question. Are you familiar with the Cobra effect? I'll just share. So it happened in India, and they basically wanted to get rid of cobras. And every dead cobra they would pay. And so naturally what happened is you had people breeding cobras because then you could get paid. And so I think like that's like the idea is like, show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome. So I think that there are probably ways to do that, but it's pretty tricky. And I think one thing that's powerful about the caster rewards is like you can kind of come and try to game it, great. Like ultimately if the algo is correct, like basically the gaming or farming you're doing of this is a reflection of what the network finds interesting. So you are contributing valuable stuff to the network. And so like I think of it actually as a mechanism of something similar to proof of work in Bitcoin. It's like you can try to mine Bitcoin, but ultimately you're actually creating security for the network. And so I think that it's a very hard thing to do in a lot of cases. And so I think casting, I think you can. I think reporting spam, probably a little harder. What do you think?
No, I think I generally agree. There's probably some mechanism of like outsourcing spam detection to community that is like more decentralized, where people can opt in and vote. I think to Dan's point, explicit financialization will create the exact wrong outcome, which is like create an incentive to create more spam.
Yeah.
Hey, good morning. I was wanting to know how we should react to the recent district court ruling against Apple and how we can build into it.
Yeah, so that's a pretty exciting thing. For those who are unaware, Apple has had a lawsuit with, or I guess Epic, Tim Sweeney, the Fortnite developer, has had kind of this personal crusade against Apple for the last 4 years, globally, right? Like he's fighting them in Europe, he's fighting them in the US, and basically there was an initial ruling from a judge that was like, call it like 9 out of the 10 points were in favor of Apple, which was kind of disappointing, but that's what the law is. But they basically kind of gave one thing, and then Apple like did the level of compliance where they like tried to do the least amount possible. And the judge basically came in and said, like, okay, you explicitly didn't do what I told you, and so now I'm going to like go nuclear on you. And so last night, if you're an app developer, probably got an email from Apple that's like, you can add your own payment methods in app. Like, basically, you don't have to pay the 30% Apple tax. And this has been a big issue with crypto apps because NFTs fell under this kind of like, you had to pay this 30% Apple tax. Now you're free to do what you want. To be clear, it still is going to go through the courts. And so there's a version of the world where the Supreme Court actually says, no, this district court judge is wrong. But for the foreseeable future, people are going to kind of be able to do what they want. And I think it's going to be a little like Pandora's box where it's like kind of once this is out there, it's going to be very hard for them to like snap back in 2 years when the court potentially rules in their favor. So I think like people should be really thinking about like, can you use crypto in kind of interesting ways in mobile apps? And that was always a big reason like you didn't see a lot of crypto native mobile apps is because of this like kind of in-app purchase. Like obviously we had Warps, Zora did Sparks, like all these kind of games to get around that, but now you can just use crypto. And so I think it's a big opportunity. I would have told you like even yesterday, like, wait, but the fact that they sent the email last night is like, it's like open season to actually go build interesting payment experiences in apps.
Hello. V, thank you for the shout out on acid test. Episode 2 comes out actually in an hour, and I had a conversation with Ted, which kind of inspired this question, which is I think a lot of people here would agree that the community is a big, value prop, or the whole thing. It's a social network, and I think a part of the incredible energy we get from the community is its intimacy right now. But I think we also all want the community to scale. And so, what are the any risk factors you guys maybe think about, if any, that may present themselves in the way that the shape of the community changes as it grows?
Yeah, I mean, this has already happened, right? So, people always talk about like pre-permissionless FIDs and not, and I mean, the network had a very different vibe before we kind of let anyone sign up, and obviously, you can't build a network where it's just like permissioned, and I think it's better, like in the sense that there are more people that anyone can kind of sign up. But I think that and so that will only, frankly, get worse. Like in terms of like the more people on the network, people will be like, the vibe has shifted, it's worse. The difference between Farcaster and any other network where this has happened is you can build your own client. I know I say that a lot, but like, I mean, Uno, that Erica and Christopher are working on, like, I think that's going to have a very different feel and a very kind of social network feel, more than maybe what Warpcast, soon to be Farcaster, might feel a little bit more, social media or a broadcast. And that's completely fine, because you can use both apps simultaneously, and you can use one for kind of what you get that feels more like Twitter, right? And then you have one that feels more intimate. And I think that is going to be the way that you can actually scale the vibes, in the sense that you can opt into different social experiences all on the same graph. And I think that's pretty unique.
Hey, this is Vinay. You've talked about creator onboarding and a number of other strategies to get specific people or organizations to cast on Farcaster. I still have to go to crypto Twitter to find news about organizations within the crypto space, because they're not posting content on Farcaster. What is the plan to start getting either leaders of crypto organizations or crypto organizations themselves to start being more proactive on the network?
Yeah, so I think it's two things. It's interesting, like we tried an experiment of X cross-posting, where we took a bunch of people who are already on the network, they opted in, and then we just took what they were saying on X Twitter and then just put it on Farcaster. And the reality is we got a lot of organ rejection, because people on Farcaster expect people to reply or engage. And so there's this little bit of we're in this tweener stage of okay, because people expect to reply, it's hard to kind of syndicate content. And then if you're not syndicating content, then it's you have to make this argument. It's hey, you should be taking the time to go cross-post and kind of do this. I think we'll probably run more experiments on this. We may target it. I think one of the reasons the cross-posting experiment didn't work is because it was people, versus maybe if it's just a news account, Walter Bloomberg, for example, just non-crypto, but the idea just getting those breaking news things in your feed, if you want that, you don't expect him to reply, right? Like it's just like it's information. So I think there are some ways to bridge it in the near term, but I do think the other thing is as we bring in more ecosystems and more apps, getting them to kind of like build their community. I think like Base has done a phenomenal job in terms of like making Farcaster a place where you get information about Base, and I think that probably is a model for a lot of other projects, communities within crypto.
All right, that is all the time we have. Let's give it up for Dan and Varun, everybody.